Hi class, my name is Jeanette Swick and I'm going to introduce you to the trait approach to leadership. So coming up in this presentation, I'm going to start with a few definitions that give us a good summary of just what trait approach is about. Then some key facts to make trait approach different from other approaches and just kind of give you an overview. Then we'll go over influential theorist and the key theories, forming a good idea of what traits we see in leaders. And we'll look at a couple of different lists of those major traits, the big 5 personality factor, the strength with leadership list, and then we'll go over some advantages and disadvantages of the trait approach and some implications that it brings to dietetics. So let's see. There are different ways to view leadership, one of them being trait approach. So let's start with a basic overview of just a few important definitions. Leadership is such a broad term and can be defined in many ways, but overall is the position of the leader of a group or an organization. It is a process where an individual influences a group of individuals to achieve a goal. Common words that come up when you see definitions on leadership are power, lead, control, monitor, or oversight. When we define trait, we think of a set of distinct characteristics, qualities, or attributes that describe a person. Traits are more looked at as being inherited, not changing over time, more something you're born with. Some popular traits, not necessarily along the lines of leadership, but just some common ones that we know of are the trait of compassion or the ability to make someone laugh. Once we have a understanding of leadership and the understanding of the traits, we can view one of the ways to study leadership, which is the trait theory approach. Trait leadership can be described as when certain individuals have special characteristics or qualities that differentiate them from non-leaders. Leadership traits were then studied to see which of these traits make those certain people the great leaders. So, trait approach was one of the first systematic attempts in studying research. Studies on the approach began in the early 20th century, combining leadership studies with psychology. These beginning theories were called great man theories. Great man theories started in the 1840s with studies focusing on what qualities made the great leaders great. Overall, their belief was that great leaders don't learn their abilities, they were more born with them. They are brought into the world with all the characteristics needed to be a great leader. If you are not born with these traits, then you are not destined to be a leader, is what the great man theory thought. Trait approach started with examining these abilities and identifying the traits exhibited by these great leaders. The trait approach aims to find these certain traits that current leaders have in common and use those traits to identify future leaders. Trait approach is different from other approaches in that it focuses only on the leader, not the other members of the group or on the situation. Let's see. In 1930, Gordon Allport came up with a list of over 1,400 physical, behavior, and moral traits. His study concluded that a person's behavior is a product of their personal combination of the 3 traits of cardinal traits, central traits, and secondary traits. Cardinal traits are those that dominate your personality. Central traits are the traits, the main traits that form your personality. And secondary traits are those that vary based on your current circumstances. So then we move on to look at, here's a table. When we look at this chart, it shows a good timeline on studies of leadership and traits and characteristics. I actually found this table, I updated a little bit. This was from the older book, the eighth edition. So our new edition has this last study coming from 2017, which they basically overviewed it again. So that's where that came from. This chart shows a good timeline on the studies of leadership traits and characteristics. Various researchers have came up with different traits that are used as credentials for great leaders. This is similar to the chart in our book, as I said. This studies focus on identifying natural qualities and characteristics from different social, political, and military leaders. When we glance over the chart, you can see that certain traits are repetitive. Intelligence is on here a lot. I think masculinity was a couple times. And then you'll see that some of the traits are only on here one time, or some of the words might mean something like the same, but not listed the same. So a lot of the charts, it's good to look at an overview of all the different charts. This chart is beneficial in showing those similarities and characteristics of all of the trait theory studies, which ultimately what the study is about. So we'll start with looking at the first list from Ralph Stogdill in 1948. Stogdill analyzed research from 124 trait studies over the years from 1904 to 1947. In his research, he found that in order to be a successful leader, you must have traits relevant to that situation. A leader in one situation may not be the same leader in another situation. So when we analyze the traits, his first list was very long, and then he did identify that the average leader was different than the average follower, and he based that difference on these 8 traits as seen in this list, but still felt that the situation played an important role in each leadership role. He also stated that just because a trait showed up more times in a survey doesn't mean that the trait is more important than others. So with that survey led him to go on to this survey from Stogdill in 1974. And that actually started from where he left off. So his second survey was performed between 1948 and 1970. This time he used he analyzed 163 studies and compared the results from his first study to these study also. He concentrated more this time on situations and those that traits were determinants of leadership. So in the second study, or in the first study, he found that he wanted to add that in there. So then he just did another study. He came up with a list of 10 characteristics on this study, and these included situations. So this includes everything that he thinks would be in a leader. Also concluded from this study that physical characteristics such as height and weight were complementary, but not necessary to be in a leader. High levels of energy contributed to success of a leader, helping with the natural motivation of followers. He notes from this observations that leadership is evident also in an early age. So then we'll look at the second study on the list, the study done from Mann in 1959, focused more on personality and leadership, not situations. He came up with a list of 6 personality traits that could distinguish good leaders. Then if you look at the fourth study in 1986, Lord, De Vader, and Algar reassessed Mann's findings using a meta-analysis. And on this study, they narrowed down this Mann's list of 6 to a list of 3 traits: intelligence, masculinity, and dominance. And that's where they concluded that those were 3 significantly traits related to how leaders were perceived. The next study, it'll be the 5th one on the list, was from Kirkpatrick and Locke in 1991, found that if you have those 6 traits, you have the basic tools that you need to be a great leader. With these, they believe that you could be born with these traits, learn them, or it could be a mixture of both. So their study went off of the norm of what the other ones and said that you could learn some of these traits to be a good leader. Then we have in 2017, Zaccaro, Kemp, and Bader. They concluded that leadership emerges from combined influence and interactions between multiple traits, a combination of a cognitive intelligence and emotional intelligence. Let's see. So then here's another study. This one was not on the list of studies, but I think that this one was important. Findings to trait approach. It was conducted in 1987 by Kouzes and Posner, where they surveyed over 7,500 managers in the United States and asked them what traits they looked for or admired in a supervisor or a leader. The results found that 87% answered honesty, wanting their employer just to be ethical. 74% answered competent, meaning they are effective and they can get the job done. 67% answered forward-looking, meaning that they saw the vision and show more of a sense of direction, same as the company. So they were on the same page, all wanting the same goals. 61% said they were inspired. They were looking for their leaders to inspire and to motivate people to achieve their goals with work. And then 46% intelligent was chosen by half of them. So that was interesting, because if we go back to that list, intelligence showed up on the list a lot. But when you asked an actual manager, it came up still almost half of it, but you had the words honesty, competent, forward-looking, and inspire ahead of that one. So again, it just depends on what list you're looking at. So after looking at these studies, although the lists vary, we can conclude the major leadership traits into being intelligence, self-confidence, determination, integrity, and sociability. Intelligence can be described as one's verbal and reasoning capabilities, just how smart you are. Intelligence is hard to fake, and most intelligent people are perceived to be a leader, no matter what position you're in. If you show that you are smart and you know what you're talking about, most people will view you as being a leader. Self-confidence is confidence shown in the decisions you make. You may not be making the right decision. However, with confidence and self-esteem, you can convince people that you are making the right decision or that they should be following you. When you're a leader, you are influencing others. If you don't show that confidence, no matter what you're doing, others will be unsure about following you and unsure about you being their leader. So you really have to show that confidence. Determination, or one's desire to get the job done. A leader with determination shows initiative, persistence, and drive. No matter what the circumstances are or come up, a leader will push through and strive to accomplish their goals. With determination, you'll show a dominance and you will help give direction to others to get the job done. So no matter what comes up, you make the solutions and you fix issues to still keep everybody on the same page. Integrity can be described as honesty and trustworthiness. You admit not only your strengths, but you can admit your weaknesses. You can say, hey, I need help, or hey, I don't understand this. Admitting that you aren't perfect can be a sign of leadership. You stay true to yourself and your beliefs while still leading others towards the ultimate goal. Then we look at sociability is seeking out pleasure. you interact with the others, forming a relationship with them. Relationships amongst groups make them stronger, and people naturally want to follow you. The more people that you get to know and you're around, and it just makes people want to naturally gravitate to you and follow your lead, in turn making you a leader. Another trait that's not on this list, but it's gaining attention, is charisma. Charisma can enable you to gain instant loyalty and commitment from followers. Studies show that leaders showing high charisma also show high levels of self-monitoring, self-actualization, and motive to attain social power. A good example of a leader with charisma was Barack Obama. He was labeled a high charismatic leader, which led him to be able to deeply connect with many Americans as a great leader. Another set of traits, another list of traits that we often refer to, is the Big Five personality factor. In 2002, 4 researchers, Judge, Bono, Illes, and Gerhardt, conducted another meta-analysis of 78 leadership and personality studies between the years of 1967 and 1998. They found that these 5 personality traits were associated with being a good leader. Number 1 trait from their study was high extroversion. To be a good leader, you need to be sociable, assertive, loud, outgoing, and full of positive energy. Next came high conscientiousness, meaning thorough, dependable, decisive, well-organized. Next came levels of openness, meaning that a great leader always was open to gaining new information. They're informed, creative, insightful, curious. They don't know it all already, or they don't act like they know it all already. They're open to suggestions. They're open to learn and enhance what they're doing. Next came low levels of neuroticism. This trait can be associated with anxiousness or tendency to be depressed. Leaders need to not be stressed, or at least not show that they're worried or stressed. So even if you are a leader and you are stressed out, you don't want your followers to see that. The last trait that they identified was agreeableness, describing as the tendency to be accepting, trusting, nurturing, and caring for others. You work well with others, acknowledging their ideas, and you just overall include them in what you're doing. People want to feel like you need them, no matter what position you're in. And when you're the leader, it's your job to make sure everybody in the group is included and needed and doing what they need to be doing. So these, when you go over the list and you actually describe the words, you see a lot of the repetitive words coming out. So the list, if you break them down, overall are getting on the same page. It's just the difference in the wording a little bit, and the difference of the top ones associated with. Strength can be defined as a quality of an individual that accounts for successful performance. When we look at the list here for identifying our strengths, once identified, we can work on these to make ourselves a stronger leader or follower. So this list comes from the VIA Inventory of Strengths quiz. You can take this quiz for free online. It's similar to the one that we are taking for the Clifton Strength Finder, and to find out your true strengths. The main difference is this list is based on strengths of character or positive personality strengths, while the Clifton Strength Finder focuses more on the traits of the workplace. For this quiz, I know I did end up taking this one too, just because I was curious and it was free. This one is about half the time of the Clifton Strength Finder one also. So this one only took about 15 minutes. The results are broken down into 6 virtues. And from there's 24 character strengths total. And so these are broken down into cognitive strengths with the subcategories of creativity, curiosity, open-mindedness, love of learning, and perspective. Next, we have emotional strengths, which can be authenticity, bravery, perseverance, and zest. Interpersonal strengths are those of kindness, love, and social intelligence. Civic strengths are fairness, teamwork, and leadership. Strength over excess is the next group, with the substrengths of forgiveness, modesty, prudence, and self-regulation. And the last category on this list is strength over meaning, with appreciation of beauty and excellence, gratitude, hope, humor, and religious. Much like our Strength Finder test, these results can be used to identify your strong areas, and then you just work on those areas to make those areas that you're already strong in better. Let's see. So when you're looking at trait approach, one of the advantages of trait approach is that it is easy to understand. When you see a good leader, you can quickly identify them by their traits. When you see their honesty, intelligence, their confidence, you naturally want to follow their lead. Majority of time, followers want to be able to identify their leaders as being superior. Another advantage is a lot of research has been done centered around trait approach, confirming the importance of traits with factual credibility. This gives us an idea that what we want to look for in a leader, and even what we don't want to if we see that person doesn't have these traits. While the advantages are clear, there are also some disadvantages to it. A lot of the research is dated, stemming back from the 1930s. As time evolved, so has a list of traits. When we study traits, the lists are endless. Each job diverse if what traits they find are more advantageous. So there's list upon list upon list, and you need them more broke down to what job you're talking about or what area you're talking about. Another disadvantage is that it doesn't take into consideration situations all the time. People may be a great leader in one situation, but the same leader fail in other situations. As stated earlier in Stogdill's study, situations should be a factor. Another issue is that a person may be predisposed to a leadership position, yet not hold the necessary traits to keep going throughout the years. When research traits, there is an abundance of research. There are multiple versions of leadership books and tutorials available. However, they're not always founded on factual information. We just have to remember and tell ourselves, like, anybody can make a list, anybody can make a book. You can find lists, over and over and over. Just make sure you're looking at their origin of the list, and they're obtained from reliable research. When scanning, there's also a lot of research identifying the traits that people want to see in a leader, but the research is missing the connection on how the leader's traits affect the outcomes as compared to leaders who do not have those traits. Another thing to look at when studying trait approach is that its valuableness in traits is something that we aren't born with, not learned. So even if we know what the traits are, if you have someone in a leadership position, you can't change their traits based on your needs. So let's look at trait approach in nutrition. I found a few studies that will cover the actual personalities of dietitians. But I immediately thought, like, when in high school, when you start to really deciding where you're going to go to school, what you're going to do when you get older, majority of the time you are basing these ideas on what you like to do, or what you think you might want to do. Then you go to college and sometimes realize that you need to change your mind. I feel like a strength test and even the Big 5 personality test could play a big role in helping people make those decisions. I know for me, which I know I started a long time ago, but we weren't introduced to these strength tests or personality tests until recently, and I'm already well on my way to my career. I think that for incoming college students, these tests would be beneficial in guiding them in the right direction, just of a successful, happy career choice, just knowing what you're good at, what areas you want to concentrate on. One study I found titled A Cross-Sectional Exploration of the Personality Traits of Dietitians explored the temperament and emotional traits of 346 dietitians. The study included dietitians that were 7 to 9 years after graduation, working in multiple areas of dietetics. The results concluded that of the dietitians studied, they show a high level of harm avoidance, are reward dependent, persistent, and showed self-directiveness. I think that studies like these are interesting and showing personality traits of dietitians, and they can give one a better idea if they fit this kind of job or if they could see themselves being a dietitian. And it could also be as an early recruitment strategy in the college setting. Some HR departments will use personality trait studies to identify the right people for the job. They can use the certain traits for each job to hire the right people. Another study on dietitians used qualitative methods, and they were showing to prove dietitians need to be efficient to be effective as their role. Dietitians play a vital role in preventing and managing many disease states, and to have certain traits and to be able to be effectively do their job. Dietitians' personality influence their decision to work in some areas of the practice. Employees and employers should think about personality traits when making employment decisions, because some environments may be more conducive to specific attributes of dietitians to facilitate competent performance in roles. So you want to make sure you're selecting the right people that will increase the organizational effectiveness. They can in turn specify characteristics and traits that are important to them in certain positions, and then trait assessment to determine whether the worker fits for those needs. Also, for a dietitian's job, knowing someone else's personality or certain traits can be beneficial in changing their lifestyle. Knowing whether you're dealing with somebody that wants to be a leader, or they want to be in charge of their life, or somebody that wants more direction and wants you to tell them what to do, that's beneficial in changing their overall habits. So overall, we can gather that based on the trait approach, leaders are born with certain traits that make them great. There is not one single trait that is required to be a good leader. However, more a combination of all of these traits. The trait approach supports the idea that not everyone is meant to be a leader. Well, there are multiple different studies on trait approach, all with varying trait list as shown. We can agree that knowing these traits can help identify a leader. You can almost look at a trait theory as a precondition to success. If you have the necessary traits, you have a good foundation, but you still need to take action to be a successful leader. So now we ask, based on your strength test and what you learned, do you have the traits that it takes to be a great leader? And how will you use your traits to better yourself in your career? And here's my reference list. And thank you.